Up next, ladies and gentlemen, we have the smart diaper. Now, this is going to revolutionise the way that you parent.
The smart diaper.
These days, everything is smart. What's wrong with smart? Nothing.
Oink oink, Piggy says good job.
But smarter. Smarter thinks big. Smarter helps destroy cancer with precision. Smarter 3D prints a bridge out of steel. Smarter makes the fastest faster. Smarter lets you binge watch without being watched. Smarter sees the future of medicine in deadly venom. Smarter sends school kids on field trips without leaving the classroom. Smarter uses big data, AI and 5G to fight climate change and feed future generations. Because the toughest challenges demand smarter technology.
Babies will love the smart diaper.
We do too.
Take that, smart. Lenovo. Smarter technology for all.
Hello everyone, this is Imran Fahad. Welcome to the Southeast Asia Startup Summit 2022. This is the second day and the first session on a keynote on the challenges and the opportunities of raising funds for Southeast Asia. Today we have with us Hiruy Ephrem, Associate of Orbit Startup, SOSV. Without further ado, I'm inviting Mr. Hiruy. Hi, Hiruy. Can you hear me? All right. So,
yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. So today we have got a special keynote from him, and will be a very important for the startups. Those who are going to raise funds, they will know the secrets of raising the funds. So, are we ready? Awesome. So we are going for this keynote. So let's go for it. Cheers.
Awesome, great. So I will just share my screen.
Yes.
Alrighty. Then okay. Perfect. I hope the slides can show, right? Do you see my intro slide? Okay. Looks like you can see my intro slide. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Imran. I really appreciate it. By way of introduction, I am Hiruy Ephrem. I'm on the investment team at Orbit Startups. Orbit Startups is a program that is backed by world-renowned VC SOSV. So without further ado, I'll use that opportunity to use this platform to first explain what SOSV does, how we work, what Orbit does, and then through my work as an investment team member that covers close to 35 or so companies in our portfolio, what I've seen from companies raising out of South and Southeast Asia, and what's been helping them get through the big hurdle. So first, Orbit Startups, our whole motto is scaling breakthrough startups. And we are always investing in frontier and emerging markets with our target demographic for investments. We have a global portfolio where even though our team is primarily based out of here in Shanghai, where I'm dialing from, also in Taipei, we do investments primarily globally, where our portfolio is vastly concentrated in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and recently we've been making our moves towards Middle East and Africa. So we are SOSV. We're backed by the fund called SOSV. We have, as a fund, we have 1.5 billion assets under management, and we primarily invest in three verticals. We have hard tech through our program Hacks. We have life sciences, biotech through IndieBio, and my team, Orbit Startups, we primarily invest in software internet companies. And these are some high-level rankings discussing about what we've been able to achieve as SOSV, primarily from 2021. We were ranked the most active seed investor in the world, quite active in USA, Europe, and the rest of the world. Ninth in the US, 10th in Europe, and fifth rest of the world. It's all based on PitchBook data, which aggregates information about funds, investment activities. And then generally speaking, because of the work we were doing through Orbit Startups, SOSV has also been noted to be the number one most active investor in Pakistan. We're quite active in South Asia, so Indonesia and things of that nature. Very active through Singapore as well as India. So that part of the world we're quite active in. And the various sectors that we look into, we're quite active in healthcare, climate, robotics. We even have going back to climate, we had a huge climate tech summit recently, and then also last year where Bill Gates even spoke there. So climate has been a focus of our fund, not because we're actively looking for climate solutions, but more so we've invested in a lot of products that we've discovered have quite a bit of applications to climate. And then food tech, carbon emissions, and supply chain are also the areas of great detail and focus. Our offices, as I mentioned, I'm based out of Shanghai in China, and we have a team in Taipei for Orbit Startups, but SOSV overall is based all around the world. We have offices in San Francisco, Newark, New York as well, satellite offices in Tokyo. Our legal team and back office is based out of Cork, Ireland. We have a team member in Delhi. Shenzhen, we have a huge lab for our hardware companies to be able to develop their products there, and then also presence in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So why do companies work with us and how are we different? Generally speaking, we help with companies through fundraising. One part is we actually invest in the companies that we work with. And then after that, we help them set up their rounds for the upcoming round they're fundraising for. We really focus on growth. We have a dedicated team called our growth team that focuses on helping startups get to the next level. But generally speaking, we also have a motto internally and to our portfolio, where we say we don't really help fundraise unless you have traction. So traction first, fundraising second. And therefore, we emphasize that a lot through our growth team and also the investment team members that support the companies. And then, quite importantly, mentorship. So we have a network of 500 plus mentors that are friends of the ecosystem, and they like to help work with our startups. The commitment is maybe 1 to 20 hours a year. So very light work, but generally speaking, it has been very helpful for a lot of our startups in not only finding good guidance and ideas from our mentors to discuss their various challenges, but more importantly, potential advisors, in some cases, potential business partners as well. So now, what are we here for? We're here to discuss the challenges and opportunities for raising in markets such as Southeast Asia, more specifically Bangladesh. And one thing that's very clear, and that is there simply is not enough capital in emerging markets. That is changing little by little. But generally speaking, finding capital in emerging markets is quite difficult because the capital markets are just not so rich. And for many countries in which there are more mature capital markets, stuff like venture and things of that nature, they come much later after bigger financial instruments have been developed. So just from a macro sense, there's just a lot less capital. Therefore, that means when there's opportunities for startups to go in front of investors, there's very few opportunities to go a second time or a third time or fourth time, at least compared to the counterparts in the US and in Europe, where the early stage venture scene is much more mature, right? So therefore, positioning for emerging market companies coming out of South and Southeast Asia becomes much more important. And so what are some of the things that a lot of these companies can do for their positioning? Well, for one, you always have to put the emerging markets in context. So this is from a report from McKinsey, our beloved McKinsey, that brings into perspective how much opportunity there is in emerging markets. For a lot of investors, especially investors with capital, so on a macro sense, they're a bit more risk averse, because to them, it may seem that there's more opportunities in, for example, the stock market, or maybe some of the more unique financial instruments that are coming out of London to put their capital in. However, you got to keep in mind that a huge percentage of the world population, well over 85%, is in actively living and engaging in the emerging markets. And well over half of the GDP of the world comes from these emerging markets. So therefore, there's quite a bit of opportunity for emerging markets to grow. And therefore, if an investor is looking to get maximum returns, the most reasonable answer is to look at emerging markets because that's where the growth is. And so, but this narrative, unfortunately, is a very difficult narrative to master because it really takes a lot of perspective and macroeconomic thought. And for a lot of founders that are busy on the day-to-day operations, they don't have the opportunity to think about these sort of things. But these sort of things and positioning are usually quite important in helping you drive interest into your company and the things you're working on, especially for your market. And something to note here, for markets like Bangladesh, they are quite under-observed. When I say under-observed, meaning it's a huge country, as you can see, as of 2021, based on tradingeconomics.com, the population is listed to be around 166 million. Again, I understand that emerging markets, the data could be a little bit off, but nonetheless, the main point here is Bangladesh has one of the largest populations in the world and is keen on growing. With a huge population comes huge opportunities. And therefore, one of the great narrative topics that we've seen through our companies is being able to tap into the story of there's a huge market that has grown and it continues to grow. And therefore, it's important for these investors to ride that wave. And therefore, the China narrative becomes very important. So here I have a photo of China for those where it may not be clear. But the point is, though, China and to a certain degree Japan had very similar experiences with developing interest in their market from external investors. Japan a bit more complicated, but China for sure. After the Communist Revolution, a lot of people saw China as a very poor country, and to this day, many people still think China is a very poor country. But instead, they've actually missed on huge economic growth that happened over the last 20 years. And so a lot of the things that China has taught the world and continues to teach the world is that China is just a different market where you can do business. And some of the things that worked for countries that have had legacy infrastructure are not going to work for markets that have new infrastructure. A good example is mobile. For many people in developed markets, let's think about the United States, mobile adoption and things of that nature had a different trajectory than mobile adoption in countries like China. And through mobile, a huge set of new industries are able to be developed and taken over. Now, why do I bring China up? China is nothing like Bangladesh. It is nothing like Indonesia. But nonetheless, they are markets that are heavily underobserved from capital-rich players. And there's a lot of playbooks that China has taught the world that can be very much applied to these markets, especially because economic growth, a lot of times, it does follow a certain type of pattern. So China being quite interesting, and then even more closer to the Bangladeshi population is the neighbors over India. Because what we're seeing in India, as one of the most active investors in India, we have somewhere around 40 to 50 portfolio companies in India. A lot of the playbooks that worked in China are making their way through India. And one of the key examples here is, for example, mobile companies. Because the way mobile companies and mobile apps are taking over India right now is very similar to what we saw in China 10 years ago. And so a lot of the playbooks that China developed or that we've seen the Chinese populace take over, India has been having a similar trajectory and similar growth pattern. And that's why markets like Pakistan as well have also been riding the wave that India has been riding. And Bangladesh, I think in many ways, is soon to be in that position as well. Therefore, going back to my slide a couple of slides ago where I mentioned positioning, understanding these macro level trends is very important for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they're fundraising, especially when they're looking for capital that has not come domestically. Okay, so now we'll take this opportunity to discuss some of the best practices when fundraising and what kind of tool sets are going to be super helpful for founders that are looking for capital not necessarily just also in the country, but also abroad. So for one, email updates. So it seems to be a very low hanging fruit, but one of the things that builds confidence for a lot of investors, especially investors that are investing in markets that is not their own, is corporate governance. Corporate governance comes in many different ways. For one, having your shareholder agreements and legal things sorted, and overall having just good governance of your company, there is great. But that many times is internal and it's not very outward facing. One of the ways that we found startups to be have had a lot of help with and have received a lot of benefit from is doing regular email updates to not only just their internal investors, but also prospective investors. For many entrepreneurs, it sounds a bit counterintuitive because why are you sharing potential information about your company to new investors? Well, to be frank, generally speaking, a lot of folks do not pay attention, but they do pay attention to the fact that, hey, I'm getting regular emails from this company. They are still alive, they're still kicking it. That's good. I haven't heard about that company that I spoke to many months ago, but I still hear about this company. So these sort of sentiments are very useful for building trust with investors. And as you know, in early stage startups, because so many things happen in the market, a good example, COVID. Who would have predicted COVID? Uh, Business models change. What don't really change are the people and the trust you have in them, especially the early stage. You're gambling and taking a bet on the founders of a company more so than the business. Although the business can be sometimes very attractive, the people need to execute, and therefore execution needs to be demonstrated in some ways. And email updates are one of the lowest hanging fruits you can cut from the tree. And what do I mean by lowest hanging fruit? It means it's the least small thing you can do on a regular basis that can build a lot of confidence towards prospective investors who you may be sharing details about your company on regularly. For example, progress updates and also potential challenges you may be facing. And here are some good examples of companies in our portfolio that have been doing a good job and good topics and good ways to have good email updates are as follows. First, you want to have a decent title that makes it very interesting for an investor to open. For example, as you can see in my screen here, week 11, massive spike in insurance growth for China deals. You see a company here talking about an increase in monthly orders. You see another company here talking about being available in 7 languages. So basically a big breakthrough you want to be able to share on a regular basis. And always important to also include a company one-liner because some people forget who they talk to, and it's always good to remind them who you are and what you do and what your purpose is. So this small little thing that usually only takes a few minutes on a regular basis to send out to a share of investors actually has a huge impact on investors building confidence in your business. Okay. Another thing to also note is similar to what you saw earlier where I mentioned our various rankings like PitchBook and things like that. These are all databases that a lot of investors leverage to understand the market and the companies. So now, because these platforms, a lot of times they do not source data from you, they source data from third parties to capture information because their value is that they are a database. Now, why am I spending time on this topic? Because they are getting information sometimes not from you. It is in your interest to make sure that you're always being represented correctly. So there's one, representation matters. Second of all, because if you're looking for capital that may not exist, for example, in a market like Bangladesh, if you're looking to raise from investors abroad, they need to know things about you. And so you need to definitely develop a digital presence. And these 5 platforms that I mentioned are platforms in which you can work on polishing up your reputation and even building it. So this is one of the best practices you should look into for fundraising, especially from fundraising abroad. It's not important to just have a website. You need to have your profile across the different platforms and it needs to be consistent because at the end of the day, fundraising is partially about having a good business, but also partially, and a huge part of it is also developing trust. Now, something else to consider is incorporation. Because when looking at receiving investment from different companies, from different investors from around the world, you need to look at where are the best places in which capital moves around. One of the most liquid currencies in the world is the USD, the US dollar. No matter where you are in the world, the US dollar is accepted, and it's quite liquid. So maybe accepted was the wrong word, but it's quite liquid, in which case you can always transfer it or do things with it. So for global commerce, the USD, the euro, and in many ways the pound do well. Now, these monies, they flow in and out of various jurisdictions in an efficient manner. And so it is my advice to you to incorporate your parent company in a jurisdiction that's going to be as helpful as possible to get funds from abroad. And so from our experience, Singapore, Delaware, and Abu Dhabi tend to be really good jurisdictions because not only are investors quite comfortable with investing in these jurisdictions, but for services that are very much needed for companies like legal, accounting, all sorts of things like that, because of so much companies being incorporated there, the fees are also much lower as well. And there are jurisdictions in which will make people trust their law system. Whereas in emerging markets, whatever the truth may be, the trust of the legal systems sometimes can be not appreciated by people outside of the country. And therefore, if you're in a position to get investors from abroad to invest in your company, it's always good to route it through an incorporation structure, which you can get funding from abroad. So these jurisdictions that I have on the slides below are attractive to many investors. So consider those, but they're not the only ones. And it helps with later stage financing as well, because at a point where you're raising multi-million dollars, where you incorporate and where your parent entity is quite important to the investor. And this might change. A good example is India, right? Right now, India has become capital rich. Many companies are not, they're still incorporating outside of the country, but incorporating inside the country has still become, an attractive thing for many companies. And then lastly, or maybe not lastly, but a very key thing to note is that it is very, very important for companies to have positive unit economics as early as possible. Okay. And obviously, having positive unit economics is something that every company strives for. But keep in mind that companies are growing super fast. Sometimes positive economics is not part of their agenda because their focus is growth. Although growth is good, growth is very attractive. Growth was attractive in 2021. In 2022, because of the financial markets currently, it's much more attractive to have positive unit economics because that means you spend $1 to make more than $1, and that is much more attractive to people. And furthermore, it becomes much more important for companies in emerging markets such as Bangladesh because you're never guaranteed investment. And because you're not guaranteed investment, it's always good to figure out what is the best way that you can spend $1 and make more than $1 and have a potentially a slightly profitable business as early as possible, because then you're then able to dictate the terms of your round, the terms of your investments, and also have the opportunity to get the eyes of other investors that find you a lot less risky than other potential investment opportunities. So being unit economic positive as soon as possible, is great. And I urge many companies to do that. Something else to note, though, is also the different investment instruments you can use during fundraising. So for many companies coming out of emerging markets, it seems to be that equity is the way they go out of comfort. But something to note, though, is that although equity makes sense, an investor gives you a certain amount of cash and they have ownership in the business, it is also very important to consider other instruments such as safes, KISSes, or ACEs. KISS and ACE, likely you probably have not heard of. KISS is basically the safe that 500 startups and their affiliates use. ACE is something we use internally at SOSV. It's not as well known, but everyone else knows the safe from Y Combinator. Basically, these three instruments are a form of convertible. And for many companies coming out of emerging markets, it's very easy to think that all investments have to be equity. Keep in mind that convertibles such as safes are also an option, because what they enable you to do is they enable you to agree on a ceiling for your valuation at the time of receiving the investment, and then afterwards you can get the cash right away. Whereas equity rounds, if you're dealing with many investors at once, they take a lot of time, and sometimes can mess up your cap table. And because for many entrepreneurs in emerging markets, they're unaware as to what are the implications of their cap table, especially if they're still domiciled or their company is still in their own market. It's potentially wise to look at opportunities such as investment through safes, because these investors do not show up on your cap table. They convert much later, and more importantly, they're faster. However, in the grand scheme of things, equity rounds tend to be better because you don't have to worry about the downsides of a safe. But from a tactical perspective, because we've seen many companies fundraise and being short on cash, sometimes it is wise to get some safes going, use that cash to have positive unit economics, as I mentioned before. And at that point, once you have positive unit economics, you can then focus on growth, steady growth, either from investments that come from safes, or from a larger equity round that may happen when it makes sense. Okay. Lastly, something I do want to focus on for everyone here is one of the challenges that emerging market entrepreneurs or startup founders from emerging markets such as Bangladesh and other parts of Southeast Asia is that because the market may not be as capital rich as they would like, they need to find investors abroad. Now, how do you find investors abroad? There's many ways, but there's also many ways that lead you to a dead end. But generally speaking, it might be wise to look at the following three ones that I suggest here in the slide. One, it's very important to be part of entrepreneur communities because early stage investing relies a lot on trust. And because trust is a big factor of how investors look at various companies, building it is quite important. So being part of entrepreneur networks is good because these entrepreneurs can also introduce you to their investors. So having a community of entrepreneurs that you're always close with, in contact with, and always sharing ideas with is important because entrepreneurs like to help each other. And more importantly, investors like to invest in the friends of entrepreneurs they've already backed, because if they already backed an entrepreneur and they're happy with that entrepreneur, chances are that entrepreneur's network is good. And therefore, referrals from those entrepreneurs become much more attractive than any sort of cold email they might get in their inbox. Furthermore, same thing with accelerator programs. Accelerator programs, they offer a lot of services, and although they sometimes are expensive because they take equity or sometimes they have program costs, they do offer an entrepreneur network. They offer an external network of their own. So therefore, the challenge of building a network becomes a little bit easier. Do they solve all your problems? No, they do not. You still have to do the work, but you're much more equipped to do the work having gone through an accelerator program because of their network and a brand that you could to partner with. Obviously, not all accelerator programs are created equal. Just like, for example, universities, not all universities are created equal. It's better to have gone to Harvard than to a small school that no one has ever heard of. But nonetheless, it's better to have gone to school than not have gone to school. So you can think of accelerator programs in that sense as well, where they give you their network. And obviously, the more prestigious the programs are, the better, and they open up a lot more doors. Albeit they're probably expensive at the early stage, but that price is better to pay early than to pay it later. And then lastly, consider also leveraging service providers. And when I say service providers, you should choose your accountant, your legal team, and other types of corporate services very wisely, because not only do you want them to do their work very well, that's the baseline, they have to do their work very well, but sometimes if they're working with very renowned companies and very renowned profiles of people, they could also be sources of introduction. And so building out that network is quite useful for yourselves as entrepreneurs, and very good for you guys to open up doors for funding from emerging markets, from external markets. Okay, so that's that on my talk. I hope I didn't go too far over time. Very happy to stay in touch. If you want to learn more about Orbit startups, feel free to scan the QR codes here and also follow us on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you all so much, and I really appreciate the time. I'm happy to take any questions.
There's a couple of questions. I'm putting it into the screen. Can you see it?
I see Finovision.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So the question here is, what should be the main focus for a startup while raising funds? So, because raising funds, what I mentioned earlier, you need to first have your materials sorted. You need to have your positioning very sorted. You need to know who you're fundraising from, and obviously, you need to also have battle tested your products. So when I say your product, it does not necessarily mean your actual physical product, although that needs to be tested as well. But the more so, you have to pitch your company to many people, and those people will give you questions. They'll challenge you, and when you figure out, okay, this part of my pitch may not be as clear, or this part of my company people don't find as interesting, you learn to craft your pitch. And once you craft your pitch, it then is much easier to find out which investors care about it and which ones don't. And so then also preparing that is very important as well. Figuring out which kind of investors would be your profile would be helpful. So for example, if you're a healthcare startup, it does not make sense to pitch to a hardware startup if your product and their interest do not align. However, it would be shame to go to a venture capital fund or an investor that fits what you're looking to do, but because of being unprepared or ill prepared, you're not able to execute. That would be a shame. So therefore, preparation through having people look at your pitch and your story and your narrative is quite important. Okay. The other question that's been asked is Orbit Startups investing into which areas? So we invest in pretty much anything in software internet. We focus on B2B companies and B2C companies. From the B2B side, we look at enterprise solutions that corporates can use. And that's because we have a lot of corporates that invest in our fund, and therefore we work with them quite closely, and we work less closely with maybe 200 so organizations, partially to figure out what they want, help them out with finding good startups. But along the way, we also discover some pain points that corporates have, and then we try to find good companies that we can invest that solve those pain points for corporates. From the B2C side, we're building an ecosystem for cross promotion. Now, what does that mean? That means a network of companies that can work together to promote each other for free and depend less on players like Facebook, Google, Amazon, all those guys that have pretty much taken over the internet. They make it very expensive for companies to promote. So we look at companies that either have a high reach, high user count, and are very addictive to users. And then also we look at companies that have really good monetization models. And we bring those together to cross collaborate where they can share each other's networks for free promotion.
All right. So yeah, that's all for today. I hope the people, those who will going to watch and those who have watched, have learned something new for raising funds from Orbit Startups. Thank you, Harry, for your time. I hope we will catch up again in coming days as well. So till then, have a good day. Take care, guys.
Yes, appreciate it.
Yes, bye.
অনলাইন বিজনেসে মার্চেন্টদের ফাস্ট এবং সিমলেস ট্রানজ্যাকশনের জন্য প্রয়োজন একটি স্ট্রং পেমেন্ট গেটওয়ে যা সিকিউর পেমেন্ট কালেক্টিং এবং সেলস প্রফিট ট্র্যাকিং এ সাহায্য করবে। তাই টাইম সেভিং এর পাশাপাশি রিয়েল টাইম কাস্টমার এঙ্গেজমেন্ট এবং পেমেন্ট সিকিউরিটি এনশিওর করতে আমারপে আপনার অনলাইন ব্যবসার জন্য বেস্ট সলিউশন। আমারপে বাংলাদেশ ব্যাংক স্বীকৃত পিএসও, যা একটি সেফ, ইউজার ফ্রেন্ডলি এবং রিলায়েবল পেমেন্ট সলিউশন। এখানে মার্চেন্ট একটি প্ল্যাটফর্ম থেকেই তার সকল কাস্টমারদের পেমেন্ট ভিউ অ্যান্ড ম্যানেজের পাশাপাশি মাল্টিপল পেমেন্ট অপশনের সুবিধা পাচ্ছে। আমাদের ফিচার্সগুলোর মধ্যে রয়েছে কাস্টম ইনভয়েস জেনারেটর, সোশ্যাল মিডিয়া চ্যানেলের মাধ্যমে ইনভয়েস লিঙ্ক শেয়ার করে পেমেন্ট গ্রহণ, ইজি পেমেন্ট ইন্টিগ্রেশন প্লাগইন অ্যান্ড এপিআই কানেকশন, এবং প্রতিটি ট্রানজ্যাকশনের সাথে থাকছে ইমেল ও এসএমএস নোটিফিকেশনের সুবিধা। এছাড়াও চার্জব্যাক প্রিভেনশন থেকে শুরু করে ফ্রড ম্যানেজমেন্ট এবং ইএমআই এর ফ্যাসিলিটিস থাকছেই। তাই একটা স্ট্রং ব্যাক অফিস সিস্টেম এন্ড 3 লেয়ার সিকিউরিটির মাধ্যমে যে কোনো অনলাইন বিজনেসের জন্য আমারপে পেমেন্ট গেটওয়ে হতে পারে আপনার পেমেন্ট কালেকশনের একটি নিরাপদ সমাধান। বিস্তারিত জানতে ভিজিট করুন www.amarpay.com।
বাঁশি বাজায় রে মন কেন না চায় রে আমার প্রাণ যে মানে না কিছুই ভালো লাগে না কে বাঁশি বাজায় রে মন কেন না চায় রে আমার প্রাণ যে মানে না কিছুই ভালো লাগে না।
Washington University of Science and Technology, WUST, is a school of excellence that creates an ecosystem between industry and academia. Established in 2008 in Virginia, USA, WUST has been educating students from 121 countries and permanent residents. Since inception, our modus operandi has been AAA, accredited, accessible, and affordable. Students at WUST have been gaining the skills which are highly demanding in today's complex workforce. Hence, we create a replica of the work environment in the classroom settings. WUST is currently led by engineer Abubakar Hanif, a Bangladeshi American entrepreneur who is the chairman and CEO, and Dr. Hassan Karabuk, a proven university administrator, is the current president. WUST is certified to operate by Chevron Virginia, accredited by ACCSC, approved to offer GI Bill educational benefits by the Virginia State Approving Agency, and approved by the U.S. Department of Education to offer federal student aid for those students who qualify. WUST's leadership includes faculty members who are scholar practitioners with 4 to 30 years of experience, making them excellent instructors. Dr. Mark L. Robinson, Professor Apostolos Eliopoulos, Dr. Shane Cho, Dr. Zafir Parim, Mrs. Farhana Panip. With online, hybrid, and in-person learning options, our staff and faculty are fully committed to touching lives, one student at a time. WUST offers degrees, skills, certificates, and career assistance until every graduate lands a job.
First, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to all university admin, staff. We have learned a lot in terms of academics as well as from our friends who come from very different parts of the world.
We are the face of every woman, every man, every person striving to be their most beautiful self. Now our face is changing. And like all the lives pharmacy has touched, every future has been altered for the better. It's an evolution that will change everything. The products may look different, but it's what's inside that's really evolved. Science and nature meet beauty with stronger formulas, better ingredients, and the same high standards we've been living up to for over 71 years. It's a new era, and the rules are still golden. Dr. C Tuna Skincare.
Up next, ladies and gentlemen, we have the smart diaper. Now, this is going to revolutionise the way that you parent.
The smart diaper.
These days, everything is smart. What's wrong with smart? Nothing.
Oink oink, Piggy says good job.
But smarter. Smarter thinks big. Smarter helps destroy cancer with precision. Smarter 3D prints a bridge out of steel. Smarter makes the fastest faster. Smarter lets you binge watch without being watched. Smarter sees the future of medicine in deadly venom. Smarter sends school kids on field trips without leaving the classroom. Smarter uses big data, AI, and 5G to fight climate change and feed future generations. Because the toughest challenges demand smarter technology.
Babies will love the smart diaper.
We do too.
Take that, smart. Lenovo. Smarter technology for all.